On 21st April 1945, in a quiet forest near Duisburg, a German field marshal sat alone. His uniform was dusty, his maps folded, and the distant sound of artillery had finally faded behind him. Across Western Germany, American armies advanced relentlessly, carrying both the confidence of victory and the weight of ending a war. This man, once praised as Hitler's finest defender, now faced a decision that would define his legacy. Patton's armored columns were not far off, their engines echoing like judgment through shattered towns and forests. For years he had saved collapsing fronts, improvised miracles under impossible pressure, and earned the loyalty of exhausted soldiers. Now the Reich was dead, Berlin was burning, and orders meant nothing anymore. Surrender promised humiliation, trials, and a future written by the victors. Death promised silence, control, and a final act of defiance. He thought of his men, scattered, captured, and of a war that had devoured them completely. Outside, history was moving fast. Inside him, time slowed painfully. Germany's best general understood one truth: survival could cost honor, and surrender could erase meaning. In this forest, with Allied lines closing in, he faced a choice that no victory could undo. The world would never hear his last thoughts, only the echo of what he chose, alone. This is where our story begins, at the edge of defeat, where death felt like command. On 21st April 1945, the war's end was certain, but dignity was not. Standing there, he chose how history would speak and how silence would answer. The man in the forest was Walter Model, known to friend and enemy alike as Hitler's fireman. Born on 24th January 1891. He was not aristocratic, not charming, but brutally effective. Model rose through merit, discipline, and an instinct for defensive war that was unmatched in Europe. By 1943, he was sent wherever Germany was collapsing: Moscow, Kursk, Normandy, the Ardennes. Each time he arrived to ruins, exhausted divisions, and impossible orders, and still he held. American generals respected him quietly. British commanders feared his counterattacks, and soldiers trusted him deeply. Unlike others, Model never plotted against Hitler, not out of loyalty, but out of a deep sense of duty. Obedience was his armor, and responsibility was his burden, carried without complaint. In the West, after the Ardennes failed, he commanded Army Group B, already bleeding to death. Supplies were gone, fuel was fantasy, and replacements were boys and old men. By early April 1945, the Ruhr was encircled, sealing over 300,000 Germans inside. Model knew the truth: resistance would only kill more men, without changing the outcome. Berlin ordered him to fight, to hold, to die gloriously, but Model saw madness. Surrendering the Ruhr intact would save lives, but it would brand him a traitor. Worse still, surrender meant handing himself to Americans, to Patton, a rival he respected. To Model, captivity was failure, and failure was something he refused to survive. So he dissolved his command, dismissed his soldiers, and walked into the trees. On 21st April 1945, the general removed his insignia and prepared for silence. On 21st April 1945, the Ruhr Pocket collapsed without a single final battle. Across factories, villages, and mine shafts, German soldiers laid down their rifles quietly. American units moved in cautiously, expecting fanatics, last stands, and bloodshed, but instead they found surrender. Tens of thousands marched into captivity, alive, confused, and relieved. Walter Model watched from a distance, unseen, already erased from command. He had ordered his officers to disband, to save their men, and to disappear. To Berlin, this was betrayal. To his soldiers, it was mercy. Patton would later admit respect, saying Model fought hard, but fought smart. Yet respect could not protect him from tribunals, newspapers, and history's courtroom. Model knew what awaited German generals: questions, accusations, and public disgrace. He had enforced Hitler's orders, defended the regime, and never resisted openly. In a post-war world, nuance would vanish, and judgment would be blunt. The forest became his refuge, not from bullets, but from explanations. He carried a pistol, standard issue, heavy with finality. No note was written, no speech prepared, no apology offered. For Model, words were unnecessary. Duty had already spoken. Somewhere nearby, American soldiers laughed, unaware of who stood close. On 21st April 1945, a single gunshot ended the silence. Germany lost its last defensive genius, without surrender, without trial. History would debate his choice, but could never question its resolve. News of Model's death spread slowly, through headquarters, rumors and quiet confirmations. American officers were stunned, not by suicide, but by who had chosen it. Patton reportedly paused, absorbing the weight of a rival removed by his own hand. There would be no dramatic capture, no face-to-face meeting, no final exchange. For Patton, war was theater, motion, confrontation, and Model denied him that ending. Among German prisoners, reactions were mixed: grief, respect, grim understanding. Many had expected their general to share captivity, to explain himself, to lead again. Instead, he vanished into legend, leaving questions behind like spent shells. In Berlin, the regime barely noticed. It was too busy collapsing inward. Hitler was already underground, issuing fantasies to armies that no longer existed. Model's death symbolized something deeper: the end of professional German command. No speeches followed, no medals awarded, no funerals arranged. His body was found later, quietly buried, without ceremony, without flag. Post-war historians would struggle to place him neatly into moral categories. He was neither monster nor hero, neither resistor nor zealot. He was a soldier shaped by obedience and destroyed by consequence. For the Allies, his suicide removed a witness to uncomfortable truths. For Germany, it removed a mirror reflecting responsibility without ideology. The war in Europe would end soon, but judgment was just beginning. Model had escaped courts, but not history's long memory. His choice forced a question still whispered today: is surrender always braver than death? After the gunshot, silence returned to the Ruhr, but the war moved on. On 7th May 1945, Germany signed its surrender, ending the fighting in Europe. Cities celebrated, prisoners waited, and questions began to surface slowly. Why had Model chosen death when others faced trials and survived? The answer lived in the culture he served: honor, duty, and consequence. Prussian tradition taught officers that command was responsibility, not privilege. When armies died, commanders answered, sometimes with their lives. Model believed defeat was his alone, even when defeat was inevitable. He had commanded Army Group B, and it had ceased to exist. To him, survival after failure felt like theft from the dead. Unlike Rommel, he never rebelled, never doubted, never broke publicly. That loyalty chained him to outcomes he could not escape later. In Allied camps, German generals prepared defenses, explanations, memoirs. Model prepared nothing, choosing control over justification. Historians would later argue suicide avoided accountability and moral reckoning. Others countered that his disbanding saved tens of thousands quietly. Patton himself admitted Model spared blood when blood was expected. Yet mercy did not erase service to a criminal regime. This tension defines Model's shadow: competence without conscience, duty without dissent. His death closed one chapter, but opened a harder debate. Can professionalism excuse obedience when obedience fuels catastrophe? Model never answered, leaving history to wrestle alone. In the years after the war, Walter Model became an uncomfortable subject. Germany wanted distance, the Allies wanted clarity, and Model offered neither. He left no memoir, no testimony, no convenient confession. Without his voice, others spoke for him, often imperfectly. Some veterans remembered a commander who shared danger and listened. Others recalled brutality, rigid discipline, and absolute obedience. Model's battlefield genius was undeniable, but his moral position deeply fractured. Cold War historians reframed him as a purely military figure. His defensive brilliance studied, his choices isolated from ideology. This separation made him useful, but incomplete. Patton's legend grew, bold, loud, victorious. Model's legend remained quiet, defensive, unresolved. Two generals, equals in skill, opposites in temperament, never met. Their war ended without dialogue, without confrontation. Model's suicide denied history that symbolic reckoning. It also denied Germany a chance to question itself openly. As trials exposed crimes, silence protected competence. Model's absence became a void, filled by speculation. Was he loyal to Germany or trapped by habit? Was death courage or evasion? Each generation answered differently, reflecting its own values. The forest where he died remains ordinary, unmarked, and forgotten. Yet the decision made, there still echoes in every discussion of duty. To understand Model's final choice, one must understand the army he embodied. The German General Staff prized efficiency, obedience, and results above morality. Officers were trained to execute, not to question, and to endure consequences. Model fit this system perfectly, rising without politics, without charisma. He believed war was craft, not ideology, and command was a burden. Yet the system he served fused professionalism with criminal power. When Hitler issued impossible orders, Model adapted tactically, not morally. This adaptability saved fronts, but prolonged destruction. Patton fought the enemy, loudly, visibly, personally. Model fought collapse, quietly, defensively, relentlessly. Their philosophies never aligned, and never would. When defeat came, Patton expected surrender, dialogue, and reckoning. Model expected accounting, measured internally, not publicly. In his world, capture meant becoming a symbol, one that could be twisted, misunderstood, or condemned. Death preserved autonomy, the last decision no one could override. This was not fear, but control in his own mind. Still, control carried a cost. Families unanswered, soldiers abandoned emotionally. Model's wife learned through whispers, not letters. His children inherited questions, not explanations. War ended for nations, but not for memory. Model's choice ensured that his story would remain contested forever. By the 1950s, Walter Model existed mostly in footnotes. Germany rebuilt, aligned westward, and avoided uncomfortable reflections. Patton became myth, speeches quoted, victories filmed, personality celebrated. Model remained a study for staff colleges, not public memory. Military academies analyzed his defenses, his withdrawals, his improvisation under pressure. Rarely did they analyze the cost of prolonging doomed campaigns. This selective memory mirrored post-war needs, stability over truth. In private correspondence, some Allied officers admitted admiration. They respected his restraint during the Ruhr collapse. Tens of thousands lived because he dismissed his army, yet that mercy arrived only after years of obedience. Model never chose resistance when resistance mattered. This contradiction defined him, brilliance paired with silence. The forest death simplified nothing, it complicated everything. For younger generations, the question sharpened, is refusal to surrender an act of honor or pride? Does ending one's life reclaim agency or erase responsibility? Model left no answers, only an example. An example some soldiers quietly understood, an example civilians struggled to accept. History does not demand heroes, it demands understanding. Model's story resists comfort because it exposes systems that reward skill while ignoring consequence. Part 9. As decades passed, Walter Model's decision grew heavier, not lighter. Each new war reopened the question of obedience and personal responsibility. Modern officers studied his case quietly, behind classroom doors. They asked, what happens when loyalty outlives legitimacy? Model's final act forced a mirror into military ethics. He saved lives at the end, yet prolonged suffering before it. Both truths exist together, uncomfortably. Patton's legacy thrived in clarity. Winner, survivor, narrator. Model's legacy lingered in ambiguity, efficient, loyal, silent. One wrote his story through victory, the other through absence. In Germany, remembrance culture shifted slowly, painfully. Victims took center stage. Perpetrators lost excuses. Model fit neither category cleanly. He was not an ideologue, but he enabled one. He was not cruel by design, but he enforced cruelty. His suicide avoided courts, but could not avoid judgment. Judgment arrived through scholarship, debate, and moral reckoning. Every analysis returned to that forest moment. A single man choosing death over surrender. Not to protect secrets, but to preserve identity. In that choice, the war did not end. It simply changed form, from battlefields to memory. And memory, unlike war, never truly surrender. In the end, Walter Model left no final message. No apology, no justification, no warning was offered. His silence became his statement and his death his punctuation. Germany moved forward, carrying scars and unanswered questions. Patton returned home, celebrated, restless, and soon gone himself. Two generals, shaped by war, both consumed by it differently. Model's choice still unsettles because it denies closure. Surrender offers narrative, trials, and resolution. Death offers none, only absence. In the forest near Duisburg, nothing marks the spot. Birds pass, seasons change, and history remains invisible. Yet the decision made, there continues to echo. It reminds us that war tests not just courage, but conscience. Skill without dissent can serve catastrophe. Duty without reflection can destroy meaning. Model believed control mattered until the last second. But history does not reward control. It examines consequence. His life forces an uncomfortable truth. Great generals are not measured only by victories. They are measured by what they choose when victory is gone. On 21st April 1945, one man chose death. The world chose memory, debate, and judgment. And that conversation remains unfinished, even now.